Tom is the VP of Marketing at Spansion, and I've known Tom for many years when he's had strategic positions at Kimonda and Samsung. And Tom is here to speak to the connected car. Please welcome Tom Trill.
Thank you, Shane. Good afternoon, everybody. So, Tom Trill from Spansion. Spansion is probably best known as the market leader for the embedded NOR flash space. And we've been working in the automotive industry for the best part of 20, maybe more years. You'll find our parts in everything from powertrain all the way through to the latest digitalized instrument clusters and ADIS products. You probably have seen us in the news a little bit more recently as well, in terms of our recent announcement of the acquisition of Fujitsu's MCU business and their analog business. Fujitsu, as you may know, a fairly decent foothold in the automotive industry as well, so very exciting times for us at Spansion. What makes it even more exciting in the context of the connected car is the fact that we have a focus on the communication segment, the industrial and the consumer segment, as well as automotive. So we get a view and a perspective of all the components that are really necessary to make a ubiquitous connected car infrastructure. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next 30-35 minutes. Before I get into it, I wanted to share a little story with you, and I hope you get a kick out of it. I have a daughter, she's 8 years old, and she's a second grader. And today she had her first presentation ever. So she was super stoked for the last 2 weeks about the fact that she and I had a presentation on the same day, about 1 hour apart. You know, she wanted Shane to move me in to a line, but, you know, and kids being kids, it turned into a lot of fun, but this big production. So for the past 2 weeks, I go home in the evening, dining room table converted to this study, synchronized computers, synchronized research, synchronized slides, and last night we got to the speaker notes. So I was super paranoid about them getting mixed up. But I did a quick check. There's nothing about, you know, endangered species from the African savannah in here. But if I do digress, please just bear with me. You know why. If I do mention African hunting dogs and so on. So great conference, by the way. I was here 2 years ago in San Fran. Very good, very valuable to my employer at the time. I'm very happy to have an opportunity to present today. So thank you all for attending. IDC reported recently that in Q4, about 47% of all cell phones sold were made up of smartphones. And that there's about 1 billion smartphones deployed in the world in use today globally, and that number is set to double to 2 billion by 2015. That's a phenomenal growth rate. And compliments of Mr. Jobs and Apple, you know, the whole world has become apptized. And the app, the humble app, it's only 5 years old, but it's already a humble app, has been one of the most disruptive technologies, I think, of the century so far. And when we look back, I think time will tell that it is quite profound. One of the most compelling things about the app technology is that, unlike other technologies, its adoption, and specifically its early adoption, is not just limited to the younger generation coming up and embracing it. It permeates every generation, from your children and grandchildren, parents and grandparents, and everybody in between. And it doesn't even stop there. And we see stories, you know, every other month about chimpanzees and dolphins learning to communicate with their trainers through apps and tablets. So the rate of apptization goes well beyond that 1 billion number of people in the world today. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that the value of the app economy in 2012 was in excess of $25 billion. $25 billion in just 5 years. It came from nowhere. You know, when I think about that, I think that none of us probably had that in our 5-year plan. And there's a lot of 5-year plans in the room here, I'm sure. But thinking through the implications of this apptization and this app effect and the emergence of smart mobile devices, tablets and smartphones, and what has happened in that 5-year period from 2008 to 2013. And just to timestamp this a little bit for you, 2007 was the release of the iPhone. and the iPad didn't come to market until 2010. So that'll give you sort of a lay of the land. And think about what has happened in the 5-year period since 2008. We've had 5 releases of Android. We've had a handful of releases of iOS and a complete overhaul of the Windows operating system. And it's become much more mobilized. We've had thousands, if not tens of thousands of new consumer devices come to market, raising the bar for the consumer experience higher and higher all the time. Now, when I think back to our design engineers and what they were doing in the automotive segment in 2008, they were working on cars and platforms that were coming to market in 2011 and 2012. Compared to the cadence of the consumer market is really quite slow. Now, fast forward to today and think about what's going to happen between now and 2018, the next 5 years. So we'll get this constant stream of consumer devices, just again raising that bar and setting expectations and pushing the envelope in terms of integration, user experience, and the amount of products that come to market is just phenomenal. We don't even know what will be in the market if you count on history as a barometer of the future. Contrasted to the automotive design cycle, you just have this problem of these opposing forces where an automotive design engineer today at best will probably have 1.5 or 2 new platforms to market in the same time frame as we see a plethora of consumer devices coming out. So these opposing forces really are to be reconciled, and should we really actively try and reconcile them? Probably not, when I think about it, because the power of the consumer is so forceful that in a free market, the consumer always wins. And there's a couple of other drivers, of course. Darwin, and the survival of the fittest. If the product doesn't meet expectation, it dies. And also this imminent threat of BYOD, bring your own device. And we see the bring your own device effect in many cars today already. A lot of the brands are building docking stations in the car for your device, your tablet or your smartphone. So that's a threat, and surely the automotive industry doesn't want to allow that happen to their dashboard. So this living here in the States, you'll have seen a vast increase in the commercials coming out of Detroit, touting the elimination of buttons and dials and knobs and the replacement of touch screens and touch panels. And it's very encouraging, there's no doubt about that. But the harsh reality is that what you find in a car today just fails to meet the expectations that have been set by the consumer device industry. And the automotive designers are constantly chasing the consumer guys, and they just can't keep up because of this disparity between the 2 design cycles, 6 to 9 months, every holiday, every CES, versus the 2, 3, 4, 5-year cycles that you find the automotive guys are tied to. But I think all that's about to change, and one piece of evidence in my mind is the Tesla and the Model S. A colleague of mine, Dawn, she's actually here today, so she'll attest that this is a real story. She just recently bought a Tesla, and she was telling me about driving home on one of the freeways, and she gets a call from her husband. Her husband says, "Hey Dawn, what are you doing driving 50 miles an hour on 280? And there's no traffic, and you have 80% fuel left, or energy left in your fuel cells. What's the problem?" So it turns out he has the Tesla app, and he's able to remotely monitor everything that's going on in the car. So that it got me thinking. It got me thinking about what's the legacy of the Model S. And fair enough, you can say the electrification of the car, very profound. The tabletization of the dashboard, very compelling as well. But when I think about this and spend a little bit of time noodling on this, you'll feel, or hopefully you'll agree, that it's Tesla's ability to have created a consumer class, app-enabled, connected automotive experience. And that's a lot of words together, but really when you put it together, you understand what's so compelling about this driving experience. And the design engineers at Tesla have broken away and decoupled from this 3 to 5 year design cycle that the automotive industry is trapped in, and they've managed to bring today's technology into today's car. And that's something that just simply has never happened in the automotive space. My screen just went blank. So there's a big but to this. And the but is that we all know luxury goods just don't create mass markets. And you need a mass market to really mobilize our world, the limited connected car experience we have, into something more compelling, something more ubiquitous. So one thing that we do also know from history is that luxury goods can be a trigger event to really stimulate the creation of a mass market. The iPhone is a great example. It wasn't the first, and it is clearly a luxury good. But what it did is stimulate the creation of this $25 billion app market. And it's also stimulated the creation of a multi-billion-dollar smart mobile device market. I think Apple today has about 1/4 market share of the smartphone device market and probably 75% share of the profits. So it maintains this luxury goods status, and yet it has been the trigger event for this huge phenomena that we're all living today. So my question is, does Tesla and this app-enabled seamless connectivity driving experience have the power to be that tipping point to move our connected car, basic connected car infrastructure into being a more ubiquitous mass market? So, I've spoken about Tesla, but they're clearly not the only one that has a connected platform, and these are two of the more common names, OnStar from GM and Sync in Ford's from Microsoft. So it's not a new phenomena, and there's nothing wrong with these two technologies. Their platforms are sound, they're solid platforms, and they're integrated and embedded very seamlessly. But I think they're grossly underutilized, and it's not the infrastructure that disables that either. The infrastructure is there. We all see the 3G and 4G build-out happening today, so that's not the problem. The problem is the use model and the usage behavior. It just doesn't, it just hasn't been enabled by these platforms. And that's what really sets Tesla Model S apart from the pack of two or three. That they've created this, they've brought the living room experience into the car, into the automotive cabin. And that's a very compelling value prop for them. So GM, I read this article recently talking about GM switching over to AT&T as a service provider. The author of the article was very cynical about it and very sarcastic in his review. And he basically talks about this ad coming in 2014. Where you deliver 4G LTE to the car, and what it will do for you is you get faster mobile data speeds. We all get that anyway. Enhanced safety and telematics. If it's a function of the speed, it's going to happen anyway. Streaming video into the backseat, that's good. That's very good, especially for parents. And added real-time services, and this is where he got really cynical. It's a euphemism for location-based services, which in turn is a euphemism for ads and commercials. And, he says, and I think rightly so, that we spend most of our media time nowadays screening commercials and screening ads and trying to get away from them. So it's not very compelling, and what influence will this have in the creation of the connected car, the ubiquity that we're hoping for? Now, the other piece of this is much more encouraging, and that is they envision the future purchase behavior for a car to include a data plan. And all the content providers nowadays reel you in and they say add your friends and family to your plan, and that market's saturated. And so now they talk about add your other devices, add your tablets and all your gadgets at home to your data plan. Market saturated. So now they've got their eye on the car. So in the future they envisage you going to your AT&Ts or your Verizon Sprints, whomever, and you're adding all of these to your plan, and then you're adding your car or your cars to the plan. That's pretty compelling, and that's pretty innovative, and that will definitely have an influence in the mass adoption. So really what I'm talking about at this point in the presentation is this need and this desire to monetize technology so it attracts more users and to create a win-win. And that's the sort of inertia that we need to create a mass adoption of connected car technology and so on and so forth. So, yeah, so in other words, I'm talking about this virtuous circle. And a virtuous circle is really a prerequisite to take a technology and make it and scale it and make it meaningful and make it ubiquitous in the world. These are the components as we see it. It all starts with consumer adoption, and the more consumers you get to adopt a technology, the more pressure you put on the existing infrastructure, and then you enter into a period of capital-intensive expansion of that infrastructure, and that in turn enables new business models, and that draws new users, which then creates more profits for the providers. More profits fuels innovation, and from there you get more products coming to market, and ultimately more users, and hence the virtuous circle that's necessary to bring any technology from a luxury good into a mass market scenario. If I zone in here on infrastructure, I just wanted to break the thought and talk a little bit about a debate that's ongoing in Washington about the wireless spectrum. Many years ago, 10 or 15 years ago or something like that, the US government reserved a part of the wireless spectrum to dedicate and allocate to the connected car. And the consumer lobby is pushing to have that released, released and opened up for commercialization, broad commercialization. So they're not wrong, because you need this big wave of commercialization in order to stimulate the adoption and get into the virtuous circle and so on and so forth. And don't quote me on this, the government is also right. The government is right because once you reach a ubiquitous network of connected cars, it becomes part of the national grid. And there are huge security implications for the national grid. So we have to preserve part of the wireless spectrum for connected car. There's no question about it. So in the words of Doug Newcomb, who's a real connected car aficionado, can we all just get along? We need both. It's very simple. We need to commercialize it and we need to protect it. So it's rather simple. So just getting back to this idea of the virtuous circle, and I just wanted to kind of emphasize that it really is the engine to mobilize the mass adoption and deployment of connected car. And there is a precedent, and it's one that's rather recent in our history, and that's with solar. Solar was in a similar state of development and innovation and adoption as connected car is today, several years ago. And the government subsidized it, and they introduced feed-in tariffs for residential solar, by the way. This subsidies and the feed-in tariffs were really a trigger event to hit the tipping point that moved residential solar into this mass market, into this virtuous circle. And there's another really important element to this case study, and that's with solar, there's basically one question that you have to ask yourself when you're putting solar on your home. Do you want to be grid-tied or do you want to be off-grid? And if you're grid-tied, you get a financial reward, so there is an economic return. If you're off-grid, you get energy autonomy. Either way, it's a win-win, you're satisfied. And what this experience, this example has really taught us is that monetizing the technology and creating that tipping point, this subsidies and the fits, has really moved, and I know solar has had its problems and growing pains, and it still does, but conceptually, it's moved the technology into the realm of the mass market, and that's what we need to really create ubiquity. So it's not much of a stretch to apply the same rationale to the connected car. And when I thought about this, I thought, well, why not connected car as a service? Everything else is as a service today. Why not connected car? And if you think about the connected car as a service, that delivers value. It delivers an economic return, or it delivers some sort of autonomy from the network. Either way, there's a monetization and a win-win. There's a great example. Unfortunately, he's surrounded by tragedy in the tsunami that hit Japan a few years ago. Yeah, so Honda for many years have embedded a sophisticated technology in their cars. I think they call it floating car, floating navi, or something like that. But the point is that most Honda cars have subscribers to this connected car service. Honda has a big data center. They get real data feeds from all of these cars that are enabled with the technology around Japan. And with their big data algorithms, they can feed it back out and push all this information, driver information, weather information, traffic information, what have you, back into their subscriber base. So in and around the time of the tsunami, when there was carnage and the infrastructure fell apart, Honda got together with Google Earth, and together they overlaid their infrastructures. And with the live feeds from the Honda driver population in Japan, they were able to help identify the hotspots, the problem areas, and help navigate very efficiently all of their subscribers and the emergency services and so on and so forth. So a very real example of how and why connected car as a service is, not a stretch of the imagination. But one problem, and we've been down this road before, wherever there's a pioneer or a pioneering technology, pioneers always attract profits, and profits attract the pirates. And once you get pirates in the mix, there's privacy issues. So if I think about this, if you're a marketing guy, you always fall back on the 4 Ps, and sort of the 4 Ps that you've never seen them before. But it's a critical piece of bringing innovation to market. And how do we fix that? We've been down that road many times before. We fix it with security. One of the hallmarks of security today is that retrofitting any device with security, software security, is not the optimal choice. It's probably the most difficult way to do it. It's probably the most expensive way to do it as well. And it's probably the methodology that has the most holes and the most weak links in the system. So this is especially poignant when you think of connected car, because it is part of the national grid. And you don't want to safeguard the national grid with a layer of software or middleware. You want to build it from the grounds up. And in the semiconductor industry, and memory industry, microprocessor industry, SoC nowadays, this is not new. We've been building secure mechanisms deep in silicon for 20 years. In fact, Spansion's first foray into security mechanisms in silicon occurred specifically for the automotive sector about 20 years ago. So it's mature, well-known technology. And then if you look at the MCU portfolios that are in the market today, or you look at the SoC portfolios coming from ARM, there are a multitude of security libraries that are available in any of these blocks that you can get from any supplier or buy directly from the design houses. So it's not necessarily new. And the good news is that a lot of the automotive guys are doing this already, embedding their security deep in silicon and building the security mechanisms from the grounds up. A very critical component to this whole story. A great example that I draw from our consumer segment is a set-top box. And this is a good example because it demonstrates how you can create very quickly and seamlessly a closed-loop secure mechanism that is rich in DRM and rich in protection for both the user and the supplier of the content. It's built on the premise that you have a mechanism called conditional access. And conditional access is embedded in silicon in a multitude of devices and is pushed through several nodes. But the entire web is a closed loop system and provides a very compelling example for how we should think about securing the connected car network. The only difference is there is not a lot of upstream traffic in the set-top box example, so clearly there's some work to do in that regard. But my point is a lot to be learned from other sectors and other segments that can quickly and easily migrate over to the automotive sector. But there is this big, huge but. In the past 10, 20 years, automotive electronics have really, been an extension or a migration of a consumer technology into an auto-grade version of that technology, and they've all gotten bolted together inside the cabin and in the chassis in a very sort of evolutionary way, and it's delivers some good results. But if you don't have a single holistic automotive platform, it's very difficult to deploy layers of security. It's expensive and inefficient because you have all these siloed systems inside the car. So the first step to re-engineering the ground floor and making it really secure is to have a change in design philosophy within the design community of the automotive industry. And this is happening already. This is not new either. And then when we think about a car today, there are 4 compute elements: the sense, the processing, and from there you decide what you do with that data. Do you stream it out of the car, or do you actually store it? And if you store it, what do you do? Do you store and download later in your garage at home, or do you store and reuse it for some other trigger that happens from a sensor in the car? And the key point is, even though these systems are just really coming to market today, this holistic single platform in a car, it is all secured in silicon, in both the memory and in the MCU fabric that's underlying that architecture. So very encouraging to see that happening. With such a design philosophy, this is the street scene that we can achieve, a very functional and a very seamless network of connectivity where you have car to car, car to infrastructure, car to services, and so on and so forth. And when you visualize this, you can start to begin to get a sense for the types of business models that could grow out of this street scene. And I think not only the business model impact, or the business impact, but there's a huge social impact as well, and an environmental impact to the creation and deployment of such a connected car infrastructure. So, the irony of everything in automotive is that we talk about the design cycles being slow and long, but the irony is that the connectivity inside the car is very, very advanced. We have a long history of XM and Sirius satellite radio to the car. It's been there for well over a decade. OnStar and Forward Sync, very successful in terms of their connectivity. Bluetooth is one of the few places that Bluetooth really found a home, and more recently Internet radio in the car. So it's not really a question of the connectivity capabilities or the infrastructure, the network infrastructure reaching the car. That's really quite operationalized today already. The problem is that all of these communications systems and these points of connection are in silos. They're not knitted together in a common interface that will allow an easy integration into a connected car environment, and that's the big challenge. On the contrary, the connections to the outside world from a car boil down to 3 simple things: infotainment, navigation, and safety and support. But when you look at these 3 simple things, you realize that they're built on cellular networks, satellite networks, and radio waves. So the amalgamation of those 3 network media is very encouraging. It tells us that the infrastructure is not the problem. It's the use case and the use model that's the limiting factor in the mass adoption of the connected car ecosystem. So ADAS. ADAS is very topical. I just wanted to touch on it on this point of the presentation. So when you think about ADAS today, and all these technologies are already deployed, and it's very fulfilling and satisfying when you're in a car that's ADAS enabled, and you see the autonomous cruise control or the lane departure signal warnings and the stability we've had for a long time, and the blind spot monitoring, you feel good that this technology is hitting the car, is reliable, it works. I was with one of our sales guys in Germany in his 5 Series BMW doing 1,000,000 miles an hour down the Autobahn, and it automatically throttles back to about 900 miles an hour because there's a motorcycle in front or behind or whatever. And you feel good, you trust these systems. These are proven systems, and that's very encouraging. What they need in ADAS is very simple. It's reliability, connectivity, and security. And at Spansion, we find that our ADAS customers have a strong desire for known good technology, proven technology, because there's no compromise. You can't afford to lose not even one bit in your data set when it comes to ADIS. So again, encouraging that they're building it from the bottoms up. And the good news about this mature technology and this known good technology is that all the security mechanisms are already hardwired and engineered into the silicon. So it's just a case of tapping into it and putting the security layer down into existing technology. It's not a stretch. One of the key features that we find the ADIS community looking forward to leverage from our products is speed, read speed. And if you think about the in-camera technology in a car, or the camera technology in a car, you need an instant screen splash, and there are laws that mandate this, and you have to have that screen splash up in view in about, I think it's a second. If it's not a second today, it will be in the next few months. So the mechanism they use is really quite interesting in terms of explaining where and why NOR fits into this architecture. NOR has a capability that we call XIP, execute in place, and it essentially allows the system to bypass the processor and boot directly out of memory. And that would allow you to avoid all the latencies associated with the processor while it's doing other things like opening doors and adjusting seats and so on. You can get your screen splash, hit the legal mandate, and get it on screen in a second or less. So a very critical role being played by the NOR memory community in such advanced features as ADIS. Okay. It's very encouraging that the automotive industry is making so many inroads. There's an association in Europe called Webinos. Its anchor tenant is really BMW, and they're investing. It is European-centric, though, but their whole philosophy is to create a single service for every device, which means it's a single common platform for all of your mobile devices and your in-car device as well. And they all work seamlessly and securely together. And there's a lot of authentication, a lot of negotiation, and the trusted handshake type methodology all built in from the ground up. So very encouraging. They also approach the solution of connected car from the perspective of an app. And this is what makes it really compelling for me. They think about the app culture and our app behavior, and they visualize how you as a driver want to interact with this app and what apps are really meaningful in the car. And then they design backwards from that point. So it's a good design philosophy. It's turned the whole automotive industry design philosophy on its head, really. And the fact that they're integrating security as one of the three core pillars is very encouraging as well. There's a security expert, Joe Grant, and he was recently quoted by saying that automotive security lags our software security companies today by 20 years. That's a very frightening statistic. Despite all the good work that's happening in the ecosystem, this is what we're faced with. There's also many statistics out there, but these are some of the more compelling ones. UCAL. So researchers at UCAL hacked into the telematics systems in a car, I think this was last year, and they took control of the engines, the brakes, the locks, the alerts, and more, and they wreaked havoc on this car. It was all in controlled environment. There's another one, Black Hat 2011. A group of guys at the show unlocked a car, and this is 2011, yeah, so they unlocked a car using their cell phones. They unlocked it remotely, using not their cell phones, their smartphones. They hacked into it from the smartphones, unlocked the car, and away they went. So the risk is imminent chaos. You know, if we don't fix this issue of security, chaos will wreak. And we just simply can't afford to let that happen. So how do we prepare for what I would call the best of times as a driver, the best of times and the worst of times, having said everything that I said already? And it all starts with a change in the design philosophy within the automotive community. Automotive electronics, as I said earlier, have just evolved as various subsystems getting bolted together. We have to evolve from that, and we have to look at the automotive platforms as a single IT system. And if you have that design philosophy, it becomes so much easier to secure it. And then in terms of connected car, let's add in automotive grade networking capabilities. And why not add at least 2 layers, 2 fabrics, a secure fabric and a consumer fabric. And you can visualize it quite easily. You know, the mission critical systems in a car, your airbags, your powertrain, your sensor network in the car, they're all secured in this secure fabric. And everything else, your infotainment and your media, the streaming into the rear seat entertainment consoles, it's all open. So it can be commercialized, and it can live in this commercialized area of the spectrum, while the other secure fabric lives in the secured area of the wireless spectrum. So in this scenario, you can really visualize a use case where you can have security on the fly, for example. You can toggle over, all of a sudden you're getting too many ads, toggle over to the secure fabric. And it's all tied back to connected car as a service. So you're paying for this, but you know, it's a free market, and that's the commercialization part of this whole philosophy. So this design philosophy essentially becomes an anchor to building an ecosystem that's very much in balance with all of these core components embedded, with security embedded in silicon, and mechanisms such as those we see in set-top box, including conditional access and authentication and so on and so forth. And with this platform, this is the street scene that we can envisage. Just basically an update of the one I showed you a while ago, but with a tremendously important update. You have dual network fabrics working in unison in 2 different parts of the wireless spectrum. So car to car obviously needs to be highly secure. Car to infrastructure, very secure. Car to services, open for commercialization. This is only possible if we can create that automotive network platform that's both network aware and content aware and secured from the bottoms up, secured from the ground up. And if we can create this architecture and make it more pervasive, then it seems like this becomes safe and secure and virtuous. It's a win-win for everybody. Even the federal government is happy that they have control over the secure part of the spectrum. So, you know, there's a lot of work to do to really realize connected car and to make it ubiquitous for us all. But when you think about it, the infrastructure's in place. There's not much weakness in the 4G LTE infrastructure around the place. The federal government involvement is balanced and fair, and they want to protect the national grid, no question. There is scalability and capacity in the wireless spectrum to allow the commercialization of the infrastructure. Consumers are happy to do that. We've been apptized. There's a recovering economy, and the automotive design philosophy is changing from subsystems to this one holistic platform that is both secure and networked. And we as an industry, we've got proven technologies that are mature, 10, 20 years old, with in-silicon security mechanisms, secure boot blocks, encryption, etc., etc. So all the pieces are there. And what we want to see is a lot more emphasis on that secure piece. We want to encourage the industry to build that security layer from the ground up. Build it into silicon. If you build that ground floor, lock it down, make it secure, make it watertight, then every other layer of security becomes incremental. And that just makes it safer and safer. And hardwiring the authentication and the security into silicon, in our opinion, creates an environment where you prevent the hacks, you prevent the breakdown of security, and prevention is much better than cure. And start to visualize the future of the connected car, everything from remote unlocking of the car to self-driving cars. Without that confidence in the security mechanisms in both the car and the network that the car lives in, we will never realize that ubiquity that I was talking about earlier on. So what we need is the ecosystem to work in unison. All the parts are there. It's proven technology, and let's build it from the grounds up.